Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Renuka and with me is Reshma Tiwari, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Bangladesh Maitri Superpower Project at Rampal starts power supply to the national grid. Nepal Election Commission presents certificate to the House of Representatives. India jumps up to rank 3 in scientific publications. United Nations to set up a multi-dollar fund to revitalize, preserve and promote ancient and tribal languages across the globe. Environment Minister Mr. Bhupendra Yadav says reversing the environment degradation essential for advancing global sustainability. In cricket test series, India defeats Bangladesh by 188 runs on Sunday. And in FIFA World Cup 2022, Argentina and France in a fierce competition, both at 2-2. Bangladesh, another mega coal-fired power plant, the 2660 megawatt Maitri Super Thermal Power Project at Rampal started supplying electricity to the national grid. The supply began after the newly built Amin Bazar Gopalganj 400 kV grid line was made operational. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced the completion of Unit 1 of Rampal Power Plant PP with her Indian counterpart Prime Minister Narendra Modi on her visit to India last September. The power plant is being constructed under India's concessional financing scheme. It is being built by Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited for the Bangladesh-India Friendship Power Company Private Limited at a cost of $2 billion. The United Nations is looking to set up a multi-donor fund to revitalize, preserve and promote ancient and tribal language across the globe, including ancient Indian languages such as Prakrit, Pali and Sharda among others. The International Decade of Indigenous Languages, programmed by the UNESCO, has launched a task force co-chaired by Ramesh Gaur, head of Kalanidhi Division at the Indira Gandhi National Centre for the Arts and Director, National School of Drama, that aims to translate these languages, including other indigenous ones from across the world, to more accessible modern ones to preserve and promote them. The fund will be available to communities and non-governmental organizations. According to Mr. Gaur, who co-chaired the 8th meeting of the task force in December, a new action plan will be implemented by all member countries. The UNESCO established the Global Task Force for Making a Decade of Action for Indigenous Languages on March 22, 2021. The members include Canada, Iceland, Norway, Latvia, Russia, Ukraine, Bolivia, Paraguay, Peru, Australia, India, Thailand, Gambia, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, Bahrain, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Mr. Gaur said that there are nearly 1,700 languages in India, out of which there is no data for 949 languages. The fund set up by the UN can be utilized for digital archiving of the lost languages.
The Election Commission has presented certificates to the newly elected lawmakers elected to the House of Representatives HOR through the Proportional Representation PR system of election. Chief Election Officer of the PR election system and EC Secretary Gokarna Mani Dwivedi handed the certificates to the lawmakers amid a program held at the Election Commission on Sunday. 110 lawmakers have been elected to the HOR under the PR system of election. The CPN UML has the largest number of proportional representation lawmakers in the HOR. It has 34 lawmakers under this category. The Nepali Congress has 32 lawmakers. The CPN Maoist Centre has 14. The Rashtriya Swatantrata Party has 13 lawmakers. The Rashtriya Prajatantra Party 7 and the Janata Samajwadi Party Nepal and the Janamat Party 5 lawmakers each elected under the PR electoral system. On Israel's auspicious festival Hanukkah, President Draupadi Murmu extended greetings to Israel President Isaac Herzog. In her message, the President wishes may Hanukkah bring hope, light and positivity to those who are celebrating the Festival of Lights. In response to the President's message, Israel President appreciated the wishes and expressed gratitude towards her.
According to a top Chinese health official, China is experiencing the first of 3 expected waves of COVID infections this winter. The country is seeing a surge in cases since the revocation of most severe restrictions earlier this month. The latest official figures appear to show a relatively low number of new daily cases. However, there are concerns that these numbers are an underestimate due to a recent reduction in COVID testing. So far, the government reported only 2,097 new daily cases on Sunday. Epidemiologist Wu Zunyu has said he believes the current spike in infections would run until mid-January, while the second wave would then be triggered by mass travel in January around the week-long Lunar New Year celebrations, which begin on the 21st of January. Millions of people usually travel at this time to spend the holiday with family. The third surge in cases would run from late February to mid-March as people return to work after the holiday, Dr. Wu said. He told a conference on Saturday that current vaccinations levels offered a certain level of protection against the surges and had resulted in a drop in the number of severe cases. Dr. Wu's comments come after a reputable US-based research institute reported earlier this week that it believed China could see over 1 million people die from COVID in 2023 following an explosion of cases. Though the government hasn't officially reported any COVID deaths since 7th of December, there are anecdotal reports of deaths linked to COVID appearing in Beijing. Passenger ferry service is slated to commence from next month between India and Sri Lanka. The ferry service will connect the Kanakasanturai port in Jaffna district and Pondicherry. Sri Lanka's Ports and Shipping Minister Nimal Shripala De Silva said the Indian government extended consent for the service. The minister said passenger transport services will also be started from South India to Trincomalee and Colombo in Sri Lanka. Mr. De Silva added that the step of starting the ferry service was taken on the demand of people of both the countries. Steps are being taken to develop infrastructure related to customs, immigration and emigration and other facilities at the Sri Lankan ports. The vessels under the new service will carry 300 to 400 passengers on a trip. The ferry would take out 3.5 hours between destinations. Ferry owners suggested that they would have to charge $60 equivalent to 5,000 rupees per passenger for a single journey and that each passenger could carry up to 100 kilo of luggage.
G20 in India had its own share of developments in the week gone by. 2 meetings for the finance track were held in Bengaluru, while 1 meeting of the Sherpa track took place in Mumbai. The third leg of the finance track meeting of G20 under India's presidency will be held on December 20. The occasion is meeting of the first joint track force on health and finance, which will be in a virtual mode.
What you're seeing in Mumbai really is a manifestation of that desire that when G20 delegates come from the most influential countries from around the world, they see a face of India, which is the new India, which is a vibrant, dynamic, and India which is ready to move forward. And, I must give credit to the Maharashtra government and the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. They have really pulled out all the stops to make Mumbai a very welcoming and presentable destination.
Iconic building of the Taj Mahal Hotel of Colaba, where that unfortunate 26/11 attacks took place. Is there symbolism in choosing this destination?
Well, when we talk to all of our foreign friends, the issue of terrorism and the fact that Mumbai has been at the receiving end of international terrorism and cross-border terrorism, not only at 26/11 but even before that, the blasts on the trains and other parts of Mumbai, RBI and other places which were attacked, I think is something that is a telling story. We need to tell all of our international friends that terrorism has a extracted its price and that the international community has to stand firm and the G20 is considering in its agenda the issue of counterterrorism and the importance of the international community being united when it comes to fighting terrorism. Well, as you said, this is an iconic location. This is right on the westernmost tip of India. Mumbai is in many senses considered to be the gateway of India. It is the international face of India. So when delegates come here, this is where they see the intersection between India and the rest of the world. So as we engage the world, with greater and greater confidence today, I think it's important also to show them that this is where we start engaging the international community.
The first meeting under the finance track of G20 took place in Bengaluru during December 13 to 15, 2022. The delegates from G20 member nations, invited countries and international organizations gathered at the G20 finance ministers and central bank deputies meeting. They discussed international financial architecture, infrastructure development and financing, sustainable finance, global health and international taxation, among others. The deliberations reflected that India's G20 finance track priorities for 2023 had broad support from the member countries.
We are meeting at a point of time when the world is in the midst of a turmoil. Global growth has slowed down. Vast number of people going below poverty line because of COVID. Over 100 million people have lost their jobs. 70 countries have been impacted by global debt. There's a huge crisis of climate finance and climate action. The global supply chains are disrupted. In the midst of all this, India has taken over the G20 presidency. Our belief is that every crisis is also a huge opportunity. Prime Minister has said that India's G20 leadership will be decisive, inclusive, will be action-oriented.
The second meeting under the finance track was the first G20 Framework Working Group meeting in Bengaluru on the 16th and the 17th December. The delegates from G20 countries discussed global inflationary pressures, monetary policies and policy coordination for strong, balanced, sustained and inclusive approach to address them.
It's great. I come very often, so I'm always looking forward to visiting India, but Bangalore and my parents live in Mysore, so no, this is always great. This is a very important year for the world. We're in tough times. There are many global challenges, and there is a great expectation that India, through its presidency, will be able to help with bringing together global cooperation to address some of these issues. So, for instance, when it comes to matters of food security and energy security, this is very important. It's very important for the global south. India is playing a very important role. Debt is very high around the world, and there are many low-income countries that are in debt distress. Again, being able to have a much better debt resolution mechanism is very important, and India is playing a very big role over there. Similarly, when it comes to crypto and crypto regulation, climate finance, there are many big areas, and I think this presidency is critical to accomplishing what we really need for the global economy. There is a lot of need for the multilateral institutions to be able to deliver finance in a timely manner and at the scale that's required to address the many needs. You know, for instance, at the IMF, we are helping many countries who are facing distress when it comes to external finance to be able to pay for their imports and so on. There are other institutions that are also helping in this regard. So the IMF and the World Bank and other regional financial institutions are all coming together to make sure that we have the necessary financing for the world. So for India in October, we had projected global growth of 6.8% for this fiscal year and 6.1% for the next fiscal year. The data that we have seen coming in is in line with those projections. We will have a new update in January, but like I said, at this point, they look very much in line with what we had projected. For the global economy, we had global growth slowing from 3.2% this year to 2.7% next year. We're seeing differences in how countries have, in terms of, in some places we're seeing upside surprises to growth, in some places we're seeing downside surprises. China is one area where there are some serious headwinds to growth. I think it's a little early when it comes to global growth to tell you exactly what the number will be. We'll have that in January.
These discussions will pave the way for the first G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting, which will be held from the 23rd to 25th February in Bengaluru. Under the Sherpa track, a G20 Development Working Group meeting took place in Mumbai during December 13 to 15. The focus was on data for development, role of G20 in advancing the 2030 agenda, infusing new life into green development and accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. The impact of current disruptions in food, energy and financial markets. Issues ranging from digital transformation, green transitions, collective action for climate change and women-led development were high on the agenda.
Good evening to you and all of yours.
I have to tell you here, Mr. Banerjee, we have to go to live to Bengaluru for the G20 Finance Track meeting that is currently underway in Bengaluru.
Will feed into the first G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting in February 2023 at the same venue. The meeting was conducted over 2 days with the aim of seeking the views of G20 members on India's G20 finance tech priorities of 2023 across various work streams. 2 side events on strengthening MDBs to address shared global challenges of the 21st century and the role of central banks in managing climate risk and green financing were also held on its sidelines. The meeting was attended by around 160 delegates in person from Ministry of Finance, central banks, 10 invitee countries and 14 international organizations. The physical presence of most G20 delegations, invitees and international organizations in Bengaluru demonstrates the global commitment to supporting India's G20 presidency, particularly amid the challenging global economic environment. Anchored around G20 theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or One Earth, One Family, One Future discussions focused on issues relating to the global economy and risks, strengthening multilateral development banks, managing global debt vulnerabilities, financing climate action and sustainable development goals, and building resilient, inclusive and sustainable cities of tomorrow. This meeting held in Bengaluru was spread over 7 sessions. During the first session on the global economy and framework working group priorities, G20 members discussed global challenges including global inflation, food and energy insecurity, financial stability and macroeconomic implications of climate change. In the second session on the international financial architecture, delegates deliberated on various issues including strengthening and reforming multilateral development banks and ways to address implementation challenges associated with the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatments beyond the Debt Service Suspension Initiative given the worsening debt situation. In the infrastructure session, discussions took place on India's priorities for the Infrastructure Work Group 2023 on financing cities of tomorrow, inclusive, resilient and sustainable. On sustainable finance issues, members exchanged views on the financing for sustainable development goals, including climate action, to facilitate the development of a sustainable and resilient global economy. Substantive discussions were held during the session on international taxation on the priority areas for 2023, including monitoring the progress of the 2-pillar tax package being developed under the OECD G20 inclusive framework and enhancing tax transparency and multilateral capacity building on taxation. In the session on global health, we discussed strengthening of the coordination arrangements between finance and health ministers for pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, including expanding the voice of low-income countries by inviting key regional organizations to the discussions. During the last session of the meeting regarding financial sector and financial inclusion issues, the discussion focused on financial sector developments and approaches to advancing financial inclusion through a people-centric vision and shared views on priorities for appropriate financial regulations and ensuring financial stability through a common approach. Overall, we saw broad support across the board on the proposed priority of India's G20 finance tech agenda for 2023. These discussions will be taken forward at the working group level over the next 2 months. Thank you very much.
Now let's take a look at the upcoming G20 events to be hosted in various cities across India. The first meeting for the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion will be held in Kolkata during January 9 to 11 next year. This will be a crucial meeting under the finance track. Meghalaya capital Shillong will also be hosting a G20 meeting. It will be an apt opportunity to showcase the potential of the northeastern region to the world. Sikkim capital, Gangtok, is also all set to host a tourism-related event of G20 in March next year. The G20 Chief Coordinator Harshvardhan Shringla discussed the arrangements with the State Chief Secretary. The Union Territory of Ladakh is bracing itself to host G20 event in the capital Leh in the first half of the coming year. The UT authorities took stock of the preparations to ensure that the meeting is organized in a seamless manner. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a news commentary, External Affairs Minister's deft diplomacy at the UN Security Council.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar played deft diplomacy at the United Nations during his recent visit to New York. Firstly, he unveiled a bust of Mahatma Gandhi at the United Nations building in New York that symbolizes India's perennial message of peace to the world. Secondly, he held wide-ranging talks with the Secretary General of the United Nations on critical global issues and challenges. Dr. Jaishankar gave a befitting reply to Pakistani provocation when Pak Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari yet again raised the Kashmir issue during an open debate on reformed multilateralism. The Indian External Affairs Minister reminded the UNSC that a country like Pakistan that hosted Al-Qaeda terrorist Osama bin Laden and was instrumental on the terror attacks on Parliament by Pakistan-backed terror groups does not have the credentials to preach to the members of the UN Security Council. Incidentally, it was the 13th of December in 2001 when India's Parliament was attacked by Islamabad-backed and Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed terror outfits. The External Affairs Minister also sent a strong message across to China when he deplored the attempts to normalize terror threats in multilateral forums and said that the question of justifying what the world regards as unacceptable should not even arise. It was not so a hidden statement that clearly aimed at the repeated Chinese attempts to protect Pakistan-sponsored terrorists from sanctions in the UN Security Council and other forums. In a statement at the Global Counter-Terrorism Approach, Challenges and Way Forward, the External Affairs Minister said the growing potential for the misuse of new and emerging technologies by extremists, radicals and terrorists. Over the years, they have diversified their funding portfolio and expanded their recruitment toolkit. They exploit the anonymity afforded by new and emerging technologies such as virtual currencies for fundraising and finances. Terrorist groups have also been taking advantage of openness of democratic societies, spreading false narratives, inciting hatred, and radicalizing ideologies. We cannot let another 9/11 of New York or 26/11 of Mumbai happen again. In the last 2 decades, terrorism has been significantly countered and its justification delegitimized. Combating terrorism is a battle in which there is no respite. The world cannot afford attention deficits or tactical compromises. It is most of all for the Security Council to lead the global response in this regard. Dr. Jaishankar chaired the Norms or New Orientation for Reformed Multilateral System debate in the UN Security Council, gave one of his best diplomatic performances when he boldly and passionately argued in favor of speedier action on expansion of the UN Security Council to reflect altered global realities as compared to the time when the United Nations was established. He emphasized that while the debate on the UN reform is decades old and has remained inconclusive, the world has radically changed. The External Affairs Minister said, "We see that in terms of economic prosperity, technology capabilities, political influence and developmental progress, the changes have been rather dramatic." He emphasized that the broad dispersal of capabilities and responsibilities has been expressed, for example, in the emergence of the G20. Reference to the G20 was significant as India happens to be the current president of the G20, whereas India's aspiration to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council stays unfulfilled, mainly because of lack of progress in reformation of multilateral bodies, including the UN Security Council. Dr. Jaishankar also drew attention to the rise of India and its rightful demand to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council by highlighting India's role in combating the COVID-19 pandemic world over by donating and selling vaccines in large numbers to scores of countries around the world, underscoring the failure of current multilateral institutions to tackle contemporary global challenges emanating out of the pandemic and conflicts such as food, fertilizer and energy security. Dr. Jaishankar urged concrete action to bring about reforms. He lamented that 3 decades since the formation of the open-ended working group on UNSC reforms, we have nothing to show. The reasons of the slow progress are not difficult to find. While 4 permanent members of the UN Security Council have repeatedly supported UN reforms and an expanded Security Council with India as one of the new permanent members, China continues to be the odd member out to oppose it. Interestingly, while China does not openly oppose membership of India in the UN Security Council, it has no intention to work for UN reforms where countries such as India and Japan may be co-opted as permanent members of the UN Security Council. Pakistan amusingly supports expansion of the membership of the UN Security Council but opposes the idea of increasing the number of permanent members of that body. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar has appropriately alerted the international community that the relevance and effectiveness of multilateral bodies, including the UN Security Council, can be enhanced only when they are adequately reformed to suit the political, economic, military and technological realities of the present-day world.
India has jumped from 7th to 3rd in global ranking in scientific publications. This was informed by the Union Minister for Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh, after a review meeting with senior official of Department of Science and Technology in New Delhi on Sunday. Lauding the consistent efforts of India's scientific fraternity, Dr. Jitendra Singh gave all credit to an enabling milieu and freedom of working provided by Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav has said that reversing ecosystem degradation and halting global biodiversity loss are essential for the socio-economic development and well-being of people and for advancing global sustainability. He said India is working towards restoring and conserving its rich biodiversity, which includes one of the world's richest mix of flora and fauna. Mr. Yadav acknowledged the contribution of the parties towards biodiversity conservation and expressed hope that COP15 will reach a consensus on putting in place the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles towards the sea off the Korean peninsula's east coast on Sunday. South Korea's military has said North Korea's ballistic missiles were launched at steep angles and landed in the East Sea. Japan's Vice Defense Minister Toshiro Ino has said the missiles seem to have landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone and there had been no report of damages.
India took a 1-0 lead in their 2-test series against Bangladesh after winning the first match by 188 runs at Chattogram on Sunday. Resuming at their overnight score of 272 for 6 in their second innings, the hosts were bowled out for 324 on the final day of play. Bangladesh soon lost the wicket of Mehdi Hassan Miraz to Mohammad Siraj for 13. Captain Shakib Al Hasan was next to depart as his entertaining innings of 84 runs, which featured 6 fours and 6 sixes, came to an end after Kuldeep Yadav found the middle stump as Shakib tried an aerial stroke. Kuldeep then dismissed Ibadot Hossain for a duck before Aksar Patel bowled out Taijul Islam for the same score, finishing with figures of 477 in the second innings. The second test will be played from December 22 to December 26 at the Sher-e-Bangla National Stadium in Dhaka. In the FIFA World Cup Football 2022, the summit clash between defending champion France and Argentina is underway at the Lusail Iconic Stadium in Qatar. Both Argentina and France were 2-2 when the reports last came in. Both the teams looked to find the winner in extra time. In the late second half, Kylian Mbappe struck 2 consecutive goals to drag France level with Argentina. French skipper Mbappe scored twice in 80th and 81st minute. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Bangladesh Maitri Superpower Project at Rampal starts power supply to the national grid. Nepal Election Commission presents certificates to the House of Representatives. India jumps up to rank 3 in scientific publications. United Nations to set up a multi-dollar fund to revitalize, preserve and promote ancient and tribal languages across the globe. Environment Minister Mr. Bhupendra Yadav says reversing the environment degradation essential for advancing global sustainability. In Cricket Test Series, India defeats Bangladesh by 188 runs on Sunday. And in FIFA World Cup 2022, Argentina and France in a fierce competition, both at 2-2. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnavajan by artists from Denmark.
Vaishnavajan tu pine kahiye ke peeda parai jaane re par dukhe upakar kare toye man abhiman naane re sakal log na sahule bande साथ मन निश्चल राखे धन धन जन.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.